Because if it's a click,
the stories were adapted
click
from
or one.
myths, legends, by author Alvin Schwartz, and the illustrations created by Stephen. Brain must be a terrifying place to hang out. But as iconic as the series'
Brain is a
freaky
terrifying
figures have
place to
become
hang
over
out.
decades, there is
Why
one
the frick
whose
are you
face
gonna
is
go
most
inside someone's
unforgettable
brain?
from the
That sounds
first
freaking
moment you see
weird.
it. She is known only as the origins traced across the globe. Stories that are shockingly similar to hers by farmers in Cumberland Gap, the Grimm brothers in Germany, and even Stoic philosophers living in ancient Rome. So today we're going through all of them and uncovering hidden meanings.
Push. Select.
There once was a house that stood abandoned for 10 years as a result of rumors that it was haunted. Over that decade, many brave souls tried to test their luck, spending the night there as something had always scared them.
Oh!
One evening, a local preacher decided that he'd do his community a service by verifying if it was real. If it was, he'd cleanse the house of the evil presence. After dinner, he packed up some things and headed over to the estate. He made his way through the overgrown weeds, pushed the front door aside, which was easy since someone had already kicked it loose from its frame. Then he made himself a cozy fire and started reading its Bible. He sat like that for hours, and nothing out of the ordinary took place. The clock struck 11.
Oh yeah. I found
The hour night, his reading was interrupted by the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth in the basement. Suddenly, he hears crashing and muffled screams as if a struggle was going on just below him. Then, everything went silent. The only sound was the crash of the train. So he went back to reading his Bible and waiting for something interesting.
this
He didn't have to wait
Martin
long
as
because he
alfalfa,
heard the
Mrs.
sound of
Rosen.
footsteps
Still
coming
paces
up
a
the
bottle of
basement
champagne in the
stairs.
ice bucket next to an astonishing roll of pills Martin is laid out in front of him. Okay, it's called an ice bucket.
As the door opened, he blurted out, "What do you want?" Get a glimpse of what's on the other side, or slammed shut.
Ice
Footsteps
bucket.
lumbered back down the stairs. Not willing to investigate, the preacher went right back to reading his Bible, but after a while, the silence was broken once again by the sound of footsteps climbing up the stairs. He watches the cellar door open slowly, and a glowing shape begins to form in front of him. It appears to be a woman, but the moment he asks her what she wants, she disappears again. This time, she left the cellar door open, so the preacher closed it himself. Then he turned his chair to face the door and went back to reading. It wasn't long before the footsteps returned and the cellar door opened again. But this time, he didn't call out to her. He quietly asks her, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, what do you want? In response, she rushed towards the preacher and grabbed his coat. His face was only a few inches from hers, or what was left of hers, and he could see every disgusting detail. It was a young woman about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off her face so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was a soft blue light way back in her eye sockets, and she had no nose to her face. In a whispery voice that came and went with the wind, the haunt told her story. She explained that she'd been killed by her lover for money, then buried in the cellar. And she said that if the preacher could dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could finally rest. The preacher was perfectly willing to do that, but he knew there was some other kind of unfinished business. And this is where it gets real interesting. The haunt then asked him another favor, to help her catch her murderer by putting the end of her finger bone in the church collection plate. She says if he does that, returns to the house that night at midnight, she'll tell him where her money is buried. Then she lets out a long sob like she's tired.
The
Preacher found her
Terminator.
gave them a proper burial in the backyard, except for her finger, which he took with him to the church, put in the collection plate the following Sunday morning. As he watched the plate make the rounds, his heart raced with anticipation. The idea that a murderer had been attending his services for the past 10 years without him knowing it scared him more than coming face to face with the haunt. The preacher waited with bated breath for a signal. And as the collection plate approached the end of the line, he heard a man's voice scream bloody murder. The bony finger had stuck to his hand, and no matter how much he scraped and tore at the bone, he couldn't get it off. The man was so panicked that he confessed to his crimes right then and there. Then the police carried him off to jail. Not long after, he was hanged in the center of town. On the night of his execution, she returned to the haunted house and met with the haunt, and kept her word. She revealed that her money was buried under the hearthrug, so he dug it up and donated it to the church. And as happy of an ending as this appears to be, the preacher was forever changed by his encounter with the haunt, as was his coat. The spot where her bony fingers had grabbed was stained with her fingerprints, and they never came out, even after he used Tide to Go. I'm not gonna lie to you, I am not sure if this story is memorable without that horrifying illustration of this thing is the undead embodiment of Night Terror,
Yeah.
which is probably why they used her as the model for the toeless corpse in the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie that came out last
I
year.
really hope I scared you.
That being said, folk tales and myths similar
Why?
to the haunted house can be found
I
around
don't know
the
why.
world and throughout history, going all the way back to the Roman Empire. Before we dive into that, though, we have our sponsor, Squarespace. For over a decade now, Squarespace has been empowering creators like you and I, giving us all the tools to continue building.
Come on, go on. Go on. I want your little gremlin head. Hey, look, the reason I'm playing.
Emails with your community newsletter.
What
Their
the frick?
intuitive interface allows you to drag
Ah.
and drop elements, resize text, and a lot more without knowing how to code. And as great as all that sounds, my favorite thing about Squarespace is that you don't have to download anything to use it. It's all built inside your web browser, which means some patches, no bug fixes, nothing. But if you still find your needing help, there's no need to stress. Their personalized customer support is available 24/7, so your problem will be solved immediately, no matter the time or day of the week. So whether you want to give your business a fresh new identity or
Wait, I'm not sure it should be much
attention,
closer.
you can go to squarespace.com/JohnSolo to start your completely free trial. And when your site is ready for launch,
Come on, S.
get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
That's like already the ship is named after.
Now, as I mentioned in the previous section, stories about brave souls spending the night
Waka.
for their bravery. One of the earliest tales of this type was written by Pliny the Younger and features a Stoic philosopher named Athenodorus. The story goes that he rented a haunted villa, and one night while he was writing, a ghost appeared behind him and loudly rattled its chains to get the Stoic's attention. Athenodorus practiced what he preached, so he kept a cool head and told the ghost to wait a moment until he was finished with his writing, which had to be pretty bewildering to the spirit. But nonetheless, it waited, and when Athenodorus was done, he gave it his complete focus. The ghost signaled to Athenodorus that it wanted him to follow. Then it led him into the courtyard and indicated to a very specific spot on the ground before vanishing into thin air. The philosopher marked the spot and led the authorities to it the next day and told them they ought to start digging. It wasn't long before Athenodorus found what the ghost had wanted him to see. It was a skeleton bound with the same rusty chains the ghost rattled to get his attention. When Athenodorus gave the bones a proper burial ceremony, the unsettled spirit could finally rest, and Athenodorus was never bothered again for the rest of the time he stayed there. Now, whether you believe this story or not, there are two pretty obvious messages here, and both are also prominent in the haunted house story. The first one is that cooler heads always prevail. Athenodorus and the preacher could have screamed their heads off and run out the front door when their ghosts presented themselves, and I'll admit that's probably what I would have done, but they stayed calm in the face of danger, and it paid off. The other important lesson is to respect the dead and give them a proper burial, even if you don't know them and owe them nothing. In many religions, the funeral rituals are key in ensuring a peaceful afterlife. The spirit trapped in the mortal plane would be at odds with its own existence, and therefore in a perpetual state of misery. So as a human with a soul of your own, you should grant them the respect that you would want when you die. Otherwise, you might share their fate, or worse. But as much as Athenodorus' story has
Might be flying. Maya.